Good morning and welcome to today's workshop, which is all about the attribution challenges of high value online purchases. So the workshop is for anyone who sells high value stuff, from holidays to kitchens to IT systems to enterprise software, anything where there's typically a long consideration period and maybe with multiple people involved. So for example, if I'm buying a high value holiday, probably my wife, my kids will get involved, we'll talk about it, we'll look on different devices. And that's true with IT systems, where the CEO might download a white paper and the CTO will look at other tech specs or whatever. So people are not coming to the website just a few times relatively quickly and then buying something. So you're not used to seeing a lovely joined up analytics journey. If that's your world, then you're in the right place. So as I say, welcome. We are Search Laboratory. We're an integrated digital marketing company, passionate about this, searching for the truth in data. We're a premier Google partner, and we're also one of only a handful of Google marketing platform resellers, which means we're authorized to sell and support advanced analytics platforms and other marketing tools in the Google suite. So today's speakers, I'm not really a speaker, I'm topping and tailing the thing. I'm Ian Harris, I'm the founder of Search Laboratory. The main bulk and all the clever stuff will be run through by David Howlett, who is our data solutions architect. The workshop will last about 30 minutes and we'll have time at the end for questions. So please post these as we go along. There's a chat function. It should be fairly easy to navigate to. It's in the little panel on the right-hand side. So put any questions in there and we will try and answer as many as possible at the end of the workshop. Okay, so what we are going to discover is that it's all about the clever use of data. And just to give some numbers, Google, along with the Boston Consulting Group, have named this concept, this sort of data concept, as the digital maturity benchmark. And they've done this to try and give a language for describing where a company is on its journey to being data perfect in terms of marketing data. This is, and from their own research, companies that do this well, and Google calls this multi-moment, they call it multi-moment companies, but they're basically companies that do data well, have got a good handle on their marketing data, and they're using it, they're maximizing that data. Those companies are twice as likely to be growing their market share. On average, they get 18% more revenue, and their costs are 29% less. So that is companies that do this stuff that we are about to tell you about. So it's powerful stuff, it's proven to work, and this workshop is all about how we do it, how we do that. How do you do that practically? What are these companies doing? So with that, I will hand over to David Howlett, and we're just going to turn our cameras off just so you get a maximum screen. So I'll hand over to David now, and good luck, David.
Thank you. Today's about the challenges of high value purchases, and I suspect everyone really looking at this has probably got one or all of these issues. You're probably finding that you've got a long time to purchase, as Ian mentioned, multiple stakeholders, and really what that means is that there's this disconnect between the research touch points and the actual sale that's occurring. That is to say, you've probably got a lot of activity that's driving the most important stages in many regards of the sale, but you just can't attribute that sale to it, and you end up in this situation where many businesses we're talking to struggle justifying those investment KPIs, and quite often they'll describe the sort of top of funnel KPIs as either fluffy or something that's a bit too flimsy for them to be able to say, yes, we want to spend X amount of money this month, and we're happy that we're doing that. And what we're talking about today really is how we join all that together and how we start to solve those issues. These issues are getting worse because we're finding that technology changes such as third-party cookies, ITP, many cross-device behaviors, along with government regulations revolved around consent and how you actually track those cookies, are making it a lot harder to join those user journeys together. And at the end of it all, we've got consumer privacy awareness that's actually sending people to actually not want to even give you information in the first place. There's a real movement there in the industry. So what's the impact of this? Well, it means we're actually joining up journeys less than we ever have before. There's a real need for consent, and we're quite fortunate in this regard that because we're selling high value items, we're able to actually give a valuable exchange for data when we're engaging with our customers, and that means things like a white paper from a B2B perspective, perhaps, or a brochure, or even a phone call, anywhere really where users are giving you identifiable information is really valuable, and that enables us to start to join up that user journey again. As I was saying, so we need to build an approach to solving these key challenges in the industry. The first one is to embrace a shift to a modeled world, and as I said, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle at this point. You're never really going to join up end-to-end every touch point that's occurring. But what we can do is we can model what's actually happening when we do lose sight of that completed journey. To do that, we need to centralize data, and we need to implement key tracking solutions such as GA4. And what we really suggest doing, and what we're doing with our clients now, is we build these data roadmaps where we say, this is a key data point that you've got. These are the steps we're going to take you from a quick solution all the way through to a really robust sort of best-in-class solution at the end of it. And you can build it in stages that gives you value along the way and sort of spreads out the cost of doing that as well. And I'm going to run through exactly what that looks like. So, in fact, to do that, I'm going to run through a case study here. So this is a case study where we take a business from essentially what's basic CBA targeting or ROAS targeting through to using first-party data to put some average variance in place at the beginning, and then later on actually dynamically valuing an individual user's value based on the known attributes and behaviors of them. So what do we mean by estimated value modeling? Well, when you engage with a business, whether or not you're clicking about on the website, going to various products, or maybe you're going into a store, booking a test drive for a car, etc., every time you interact with a business, you're saying, well, these are my behaviors, these are my actions, and we can use that to establish what's your likelihood to purchase. If you were to purchase, what might you buy, and what might the value of that be? And to do that, we have to collect data across millions and millions of touch points. We need a large volume of information to actually employ machine learning. But that puts us in a position where we can say, yes, you are unique, but actually your journey with our business so far is similar to 10,000 other people, and on average, they went on to be worth X, for example. And when we're doing this, we're not just valuing online and offline. We're not just valuing online, sorry, we're valuing offline as well. When we build these models, for example, we have clients who host events where they collect an email address. We can put a value on that email address and the impact that event had on people's long-term value to the business. And of course, you've got things like phone calls as well, and store visits or e-receipts. So, I've lost oh no, there we go. So to explain then for this client, it's very similar to all the issues that we had before, right? So they wanted to build a full funnel investment strategy, and their pain point essentially was that they had no visibility of ROI above PPC brand. It was really bad for them. Just about anything that wasn't PPC brand would have a negative ROI attached to it, and that's of course because there was a long time to purchase. They're selling high value holidays that might take upwards of 6 months to sell. Got multiple stakeholders involved in that, and they had that disconnect between the research, which is obviously really important for a holiday. You research where you want to go, how much you want to spend, etc., and the actual sale itself is almost a foregone conclusion in many cases. And we're actually in this position where the board is saying we want to decrease investment towards the upper funnel because of that negative ROI, and we need a solution to change that opinion. Let's give an example of what that user journey might look like. So someone comes to the homepage, for example, they then look at maybe European cruises in this case, which is really identifying a broad area of products that you might be selling, right? You've managed to narrow it down to maybe 1 out of 6 or 7 categories, but maybe they have another touch point where they actually look at a particular product, and then they start to do things like requesting brochures or having phone calls. And the key thing here is that this user journey is actually obviously much longer than what I'm showing you here. It wouldn't fit on the page, but we're going through this process of research through to starting to take actions. And when they start to take these actions, they're giving you identifiable information. Maybe you could even gate some content around a particular product, such as the French Riviera cruise, well, in this case, the brochure, in fact, enables you to start to join this together. So what we did was we built them a data roadmap, and we said, these are the steps we're going to take to solve this pain point, to build a full funnel investment strategy. Step 1 is getting hold of that first-party data. We did analysis of the CRM data, of the GA behavioral information, and what we came up with is, well, this is the average value of a lead. Let's say a brochure, in this case, they have multiple leads, but that's not really good enough, because while we sell a lot of different products, and we know that products such as a long-haul cruise around the Caribbean is worth a lot more than a short stay in a city. So let's actually calculate those values at a product category level, so that we can say a brochure for someone who's interested in the Caribbean is worth X, for example. Once we've done all that, that's where we enhance our KPIs. We don't just want to surface information to talk about it, we want to action it. We use SA360 to actually plug all these numbers in for the various lead types into PPC, for example, and we start to use auto bidding. We've actually moved to a point at this point where we're already optimizing towards an ROI across the entire funnel, because we use GA behavioral analysis to also put a value on an individual session. Admittedly, you know, it's quite a broad value at this point, but as we go through to that sprint section, we're going to be valuing each individual session in quite a lot of detail. So that might look like this, for example. This particular person who's come through now, they've gone through to a brochure request, and we've said actually on average that particular brochure is worth £358.60 to us. And that's already a massive change for a business where they weren't able to attribute the transaction back. We're now attributing something that happens much earlier in that user journey towards that research-driven phase that it happens in. So that moves us on to the running phase now. And really when we get here, we start to say, well, how can we join up our data better? We're currently only using offline data to value online, but it's disjoint. So what we did was we surfaced the GA client ID, so that every time someone identified themselves on the website, that GA client ID goes through to the CRM as well. And that enables us to now actually join online behaviors with offline actions such as phone calls and things like that. As a result of that, we actually centralize their data. So we use BigQuery when we do these, but you don't have to necessarily use BigQuery. But we pulled the CRM data and obviously the GA360 data that exists in BigQuery already, and also GA4 and we started modeling that data together, where we're now joining user journeys up that can span over years. You know, you might be buying multiple times. There's a real lifetime value to a lot of products that are sold, particularly holidays, and we can join that all together. And this is where we get to our first actual predictive modeling, where we're using machine learning now. What we're saying is, well, let's look at every attribute we know about that person. Let's look at everything they've done on the website up until this point, and then let's calculate their value and push it through to both GA and Facebook for auto bidding. And I'm going to give you an example of what that actually looks like. So I've got kind of two extreme examples here, but if you spoke to any salesperson, they would be able to say, well, based on the conversations I've had with this person, I think this person's value is going to be higher than that person, for example. So here's an example. We've got Sam on the left-hand side, who's a new customer. There's nothing in our database that suggests we've ever talked to this person before. And on the right-hand side, we've got Rachel, who's a high-value customer, and they bought previously. When they've bought, they've actually requested a brochure 3 weeks beforehand. Now, on the left-hand side, what might occur is Sam might actually, on the 1st of January, request a European cruise brochure, and that's really interesting to us because, first of all, the 1st of January is significant because January is a peak month for us, so that naturally elevates its value compared to other months. But against that, he's actually requested a really broad brochure. A European cruise brochure has a lot of products in there, so his value isn't going to be as high as someone who requested a very specific brochure. Now, on the right-hand side, because it's a holiday, we might have actually asked Rachel, what's the reason for the holiday? And she might have said, oh, it's my anniversary. So when she then requests a brochure at a similar time to last time, we're already thinking, well, that's probably for an anniversary again. And actually, she's a high-value customer. And based on all the information we know about her, her likelihood of purchasing and maybe purchasing at higher value means that her form fill could be valued considerably higher than Sam's as a result of that. In this case, we put £1,490 in as an example here. So you can clearly see how machine learning can actually enable you to pinpoint a particular value for an individual user and how much that could dynamically change what you're doing from a marketing perspective. You know, if we've got campaigns pushing Caribbean cruises, for example, they shouldn't be limited by their KPI just because we also have European campaigns in there as well. So we've reached a point where we're valuing each brochure now based on a user's attributes, and we're pushing that through to our platforms for auto bidding, which is great. But the business isn't getting our insight into that. So there's a whole business intelligence phase that needs to occur, and we use Tableau in this case, where we can surface insights across all the digital channels, even down to products in many cases, and start to look at things like cohort analysis as well. You know, what is a brochure in January worth compared to March or April, so. Once we've done that, the next stage is to say, well, we're valuing the individual form fills, but let's get a lot smarter. Let's value every single touch point that this person's having, and let's dynamically change that based on new information as we get it. I want to give you an example of what that really looks like. So we take Sam here, for example. As we said, he came to the home page. We didn't know anything about Sam at the time, and so we value that at, say, 11p. And really what we're saying is if we were to get, you know, 20,000 Sams through, sure, we'd get a sale or two. But generally speaking, right now, he's not that interesting to us. But sooner or later, he actually starts identifying, I'm interested in European cruises, and now we're saying, well, that value is increasing, and eventually he's going to land on French Riviera, where we're sort of saying, okay, then, well, you don't need to get too many hundreds of Sams now to actually get a sale through. And sure enough, he requests a brochure at the price that we showed earlier and goes on to a phone call, and that every one of these values is individually attributed to Sam and his particular user journey that he's having. Someone else who requests a brochure but was looking at Caribbean cruises, for example, is likely to get a higher value brochure, or maybe like Rachel, we already knew information about them beforehand. And that high value on the phone call at the end is really saying, you know, maybe there's a 50% chance that we think he's going to convert, and we think the value is going to be £4,000, for example, and that's how you get to that estimated value of £2,000. Now, as we're doing this, what we're actually doing is, well, we're valuing that research phase. We're building the upper funnel investment KPI, where we're saying, yes, the values are lower, but we're going to be driving 10,000 people to that particular page in that particular campaign, and therefore the values are adding up quite quickly. Whereas the lower end, the values are much higher, but we're also probably paying a lot more for that traffic anyway. It's PPC generic, PPC brand, or remarketing, for example. And these values are really nicely spread out, where what we do is, as a user's value updates, we push through the incremental change to that particular touch point. So if a touch point increases a user's value by £2, say, that touch point will get a value of £2 associated to it. So the outcomes of building these kind of models, in this case for this particular client, we increased revenue by 14% for the same ROI, which is obviously when you increase revenue, you expect ROI to decline. We were really unfortunate that it was during COVID. It landed just after we launched this model. So in the earlier weeks, the increase in ROI was actually much higher than that, but it sort of came down towards the end. We've reached a stage where we're actually using one KPI, an estimated value, through the entire the entire funnel. So every channel gets essentially an ROI target against the same KPI. We're flipping the business from reactive to proactive because we are predicting Sam's future value in this case. We're making changes today. I'm going to show you exactly what that looks like for another model that we built. And we increase shareholder value. When you build these models, you're giving business insight into its customers and its users it's engaging with on a level it didn't have before. There's real value to that outside of just how you're going to invest your budget. So just to come back to the proactive versus reactive side of things, I've got another model here that we built that really demonstrates it very clearly. So here we've got a cohort of every new opportunity that we generated in September. That's every person that we've never seen before. We put a value on them, and in this case, we said everyone in September is worth 14 million as a cohort. Now, when we build these models, we don't want a situation where you can come talk to us once, you clicked on the website, maybe did a few things, and we never see you again. And we don't want to leave your value static. We actually want to decay your value down to 0 as we don't hear from you. And that puts a business in a position where they've got essentially a real-time value of their opportunities today, what they can maximize. And we run these models daily, so that updates daily. So these values decay to zero, and or they change it to actualized revenue, you actually purchased. And that's what you've got here. So in September, we had an entire estimated value of 14 million, no real actualized revenue there. But 6 months later, those exact same people went on to purchase and went on to be worth 14 million. And this is a really powerful position to be in, because it means that you can be proactive and say, next 6 months looks like X, so we're going to spend this much today. And you can also foresee issues that might be arising if the predicted values are going down, which is actually what this model was able to do for this particular client. So it's a great position to be in, and this is what we want to be rolling out across many businesses. Lastly, then, to really give you a summary of what this data looks like from a digital marketing perspective, you've got two different bars here. You've got the dark blue bars, which is probably what you're seeing today. You're seeing number of leads coming through a particular channel. You're seeing touch point volume, which is essentially clicks, sessions, or offline footfall, for instance. And you've got the light blue side of things, which is what an estimated value would give you, which is essentially to say these leads coming through Meta, for example, are actually worth a lot more, or these sessions coming through Meta are worth a lot more than you might think, even though the lead volume's low, or this piece of content is driving a lot of form fills, but where the true value in that research phase is happening before that is on a different piece of content, for example. And it can really shape how you build your audiences, how you talk to people differently, and ultimately how you invest across your channels. How we'd recommend approaching this is essentially finding your data pain point within your business. I've got 3 different examples here, which we see all the time. So defining investing KPIs without visibility of results, that's really what we just ran through just there, right? You might have some KPIs that you feel don't really justify the budget that you're spending. But you might also have disconnected business versus KPIs, digital KPIs. That's where perhaps your business is optimizing towards profit, new customer acquisition, but in your digital channels, you're optimizing towards revenue and a transaction. And when you run the numbers, you'll find that revenue versus profit is very different when you start factoring in delivery cost margins, etc. And lastly, we've got ineffective pivoting to customer first approach. That's where we see businesses saying, we really want to change the message. You want to segment people down and say, this is how we talk to this particular person. In order to achieve that, you have to be centralizing your data. You have to be modeling the value of that person, putting them into various buckets, predicting what they're going to do. And ultimately, you should end up with a digital roadmap or a data roadmap that looks something like this to achieve your particular pain point. In this case, it's putting an ROI against things that are beyond PPC brands, but it may be calculating profit for every transaction, for example. And that's all from me. I'll hand it back over to Ian.
Thanks, David. So yeah, I suppose the thing to take is that digitally mature businesses are reaping rewards. The people that we do this for, you never make less money out of it. You're learning about those early touch points and you're valuing them correctly. It just allows you to spend your marketing budget better in order to either lower your costs or increase your revenue, and invariably you do both. I think a big thing about this, it looks complex. We've talked about machine learning, we've talked about this cohort analysis and the sprints that you can get to. But begin the journey with a single step. What we find is some of those early simple things that you can do to centralize your data and just take the first step are the most lucrative. They're the most powerful in terms of return on investment. So don't be daunted by the complexities of all this. It's taking a step along the journey. It's walking before you can run and running before you can sprint. And it's really powerful stuff. And just to say as well, there's a load of resources on our website around this data stuff, specifically around this travel problem. But there's a load of B2B and tech resources on there as well. How to evolve into a digitally mature business. So yeah, go and check those out. And if you've got any questions, as I say, please post them in the chat. I'll just go to the chat now and just have a look what questions we have in there. Okay, so this is for you, David. What's the process that you go through to identify that data roadmap? So that was a sort of a complex thing that you put forward for that client. But how do you sort of start that process?
Sure. So, I mean, the key thing is to understand, what are you trying to achieve as a business? So, for instance, I gave a few examples there where one might be profit, new customer acquisition, lifetime value, for instance, or whatever kind of whatever the end goal is that you're trying to achieve. We say, okay, then, well, where's the disconnect happening? Do you have a digital team that's optimizing towards revenue, towards transactions, for example? It's not new customer acquisition, it's not profit. And then we'd say, well, that's the pain point there. There's a massive disconnect, and therefore how you invest is going to be inefficient. And whatever that inefficiency is, that's when we then say, okay, then, well, what steps are we going to take? How do we get smarter and smarter until the point where what we are optimizing to is exactly what your business is optimizing to, or what you're trying to grow against? So that's essentially how we would approach these.
Okay, perfect. So what about LinkedIn? Can you tie up LinkedIn
Yes,
into all of this?
Yeah. So
yeah, go on.
LinkedIn's one of those channels where you can't necessarily push the value straight back to it as easily, but what you can do still is actually extract value out of LinkedIn, centralize that data, and then through BI you can surface it so that we can say, actually, the value of this particular LinkedIn campaign is X to the business, therefore we're going to do something about that, whether or not it's pushing a campaign more than another, changing how we're targeting audiences, etc. Can absolutely surface that information.
Okay, perfect. And then probably finally, because we're sort of at the half an hour point, where we have multiple stakeholders. So we talked about Sam and Rachel, I suppose, in this example, where we have multiple people buying the same thing. How do you tie those up? How do you even join them together?
Sure. So in the last example that I ran through, actually, where I did the proactive versus reactive, we had a very real world situation where it's B2B. You'd often have upwards of 5 different leads, separate leads come in for one opportunity. And that's where you start to piece things together with things like fuzzy matches, where it's, they're all from the same company, they've all got a similar address, etc. You start tying these opportunities together so that you only get one. And from that point on, the value that you're attributing to them is shared between them. Now, before that point, you might say, well, you didn't identify them. There's 5 different leads coming in. You're valuing them all separately. The way the maths works out, it naturally accounts for that and sort of reduces the values that you're using, because there is an inherent amount of duplication up until that point, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, no, yeah, it does. Okay, good. Thank you very much. We're out of time, I'm afraid. So thanks everyone for joining. Thanks, David, for those insights. If you have any other questions or want any information on anything that we've said and want to get going on this journey, please just get in contact with us. Like I say, it sounds complex. The single step approach is the way to do it. So yeah, thank you, David. Thanks for joining, and have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.